Hi, welcome back to the Crossroads Calligraphy YouTube channel. My name is Renee, and today I'll be talking about letter and word spacing. This is an element that can really add some structure to your calligraphy as you're writing and give you an idea of some things to keep in mind as you are working through a text, as you're practicing, and eventually putting together complete compositions. So I'll be talking about the space between letters, the space between words, and then the space between your lines of text. I'm going to go ahead and flip the camera and we'll get started.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about here is letter spacing. And letter spacing is the amount of space that we leave around the letters and between them to keep them distinct and legible. This balances with arranging the letters appropriately to form a word and maintaining the flow of the calligraphy hand. It sounds like a lot, but we have to get the words on the page to be able to work with this. So try to think of the space around each letter as air or light, or even personal space. So as we're writing the letters as words, we're making an effort to make the spaces in between the letters as similar in volume as possible. So if we color in the spaces around the letters that's in between them, we want them to be pretty similar in area or in volume. So even though there are a lot of different shapes here, we're still getting about equal shapes, equal in volume shapes here. Now, to illustrate the difference, here we have word. We have the word word written 3 different times. So this first one is written just, as best I could normally. And not that it's great, but, well, actually this doesn't count toward that. But these 3 spaces are pretty similar. This space that I accidentally colored in actually still belongs to the R. This isn't just blank space. The mind is reading this area as the R. And then the next example, I'm working on graph paper. So in the next example, I put the width of 1 square in between each letter here. I'm reading the word word, and I was trying to say the word letter instead of the word word. So anyway, when we color in the full spaces, they're huge, and it's hard to tell that one letter, that they all belong to the same word. But also it feels kind of uncomfortable to look at. It's like waiting too much space in between each person in line. So we're not really sure if this is an actual word or if the letters just happen to be on the page together and they spelled word. And then lastly, I wrote them all very close together. Or I wrote all the letters close together. So it still reads as word, but it feels a little stressful. It feels almost like the letters are competing for space, like they're squished in. And I mean, that can be a stylistic element, but for just the purposes of general spacing, we really want to make sure that the letters look like they belong together, but they're not crowded. Okay, so each calligraphy hand is designed based on a shape normally. So sometimes it's an oval. This script is foundational hand and it's based on a circle. And generally, the spacing between words is the same size as the O of that script. So for foundational hand, I want my space between words to be the same size as this O. And that's going to vary a little bit depending on what the first and last letter are, but this is how I measure while I'm writing. So I'll do what's called ghosting. So I'll finish up this letter, okay, and then I'll show you here. It's writing it without putting the pen on the page. So I'm using the pretend O to show me where my next letter should start. Okay. So finish the R, and I ghost, and I know that the edge of the O is going to be right about here. And so for particularly in this example for the A, I know I need a little more space over here. So I'm just going to come up and to the right a little bit and then start that A. So there's that spacing. And then similar over here with the D, or yeah, next to the D, I'm going to ghost it. And then I realize that the O is going to be right about here. So I tried to make the W follow the outer edge of the O. I got a little bit close to this D, but there's still adequate space that in the earlier video you can see that it's two separate words. And that's the important thing here. It's two separate words with an analogous amount of negative space in between the words. Now, with line spacing, you want to make sure that you leave enough space between each line for both the ascending strokes, that's anything that goes above the X height, so you want to leave room for your ascending strokes, and your descending strokes. And those are anything that go below the baseline. And that's to make sure that the letters don't run into each other. It gives your lines of text the room that they need, and your viewer is more likely to want to read your text if it's not difficult to read. So, so when you're ruling up your guidelines, you want to make sure you leave at least a little space in between each set of guidelines. So you'll have, you'll have your baseline, and then your your header line, ascending line, and your descending line, and then leave a space. And then start over. Header line, baseline, descending line. And then what I always do is I mark my X height with an X, because this is a lot of lines to keep track of. And if I don't do this, then I'm very likely to write on the wrong line. Do yourself a favor, make yourself a map, and make sure that you're writing on the correct set of guidelines.
Okay, so that's what I have to share about spacing. I just also want to add that doing a rough draft or really analyzing your practice is a great way to kind of integrate this information and teach your body and mind to work with it. I always do a draft or practice before a final piece, just because I like to get familiar with the text, and I feel that it helps me to settle down a little bit. It helps me to relax. So go ahead and like this video if it was helpful to you. View some of my other videos in my playlists and subscribe. And any questions or comments, please leave them down below, and we'll see you next time.